Lena adjusted the straps of her backpack and took a deep breath of the cool mountain air. She and her friends, Max, Danny, and Victor, had come to explore the ruins of Drevik, a village submerged under the black waters of Veilstorm Lake decades ago. Stories told of a tragedy, a flood that swallowed the town whole in a single night, taking everyone with it. The lake was unnervingly still, its surface like glass. Trees surrounding the water stood skeletal and dead, their bare branches clawing at the gray sky. As they approached, the air grew colder, heavy with an unnatural quiet that even the chirping of birds refused to disturb. "Creepy, huh?" Max muttered, peering at the water. Lena nodded, her unease growing. "Feels wrong here." Victor, ever the skeptic, rolled his eyes. "It's just a lake." "Let's set up camp and get some good shots for your ghost story blog, Lena." By nightfall, their tents were pitched, and a small fire crackled. The group shared stories to lighten the mood, but as the hours passed, the lake seemed to loom closer, its dark waters reflecting the moonlight in unsettling patterns. Then they heard it, a faint sound, like whispers carried on the wind. It wasn't the breeze, nor any animal. The sound came from the lake, rising and falling like the voices of the drowned. Lena's heart raced. She turned to Max, who was staring wide-eyed at the water. "Did you hear that?" Before anyone could answer, Danny screamed. She pointed toward the lake. A figure stood at the edge of the water, barely visible in the moonlight. It was too pale, too still. When Victor shone his flashlight, the figure vanished. Despite the unsettling encounter, the group convinced themselves it was nothing, just a trick of the light or their imaginations. But the unease remained, and the whispers grew louder as the night wore on. Unable to sleep, Lena decided to investigate. She walked toward the lake with her flashlight, its beam slicing through the darkness. As she neared the shore, the whispers stopped abruptly. The water rippled, though there was no breeze. Lena froze as something broke the surface, a hand, pale and bloated, reaching upward. She screamed and stumbled back, falling onto the rocky shore. By the time she looked again, the hand was gone, and the lake was calm once more. Her friends rushed to her side. "Lena, what happened?" Max asked, helping her up. "There was something in the water." "A hand," she stammered, pointing at the ripples. Victor shook his head. "You're letting your imagination run wild." But Danny wasn't convinced. "We shouldn't have come here. The stories, they said the lake never lets anyone leave once they've seen the shadows." "What shadows?" Max demanded. Danny hesitated. "The villagers didn't drown. They were pulled under, by something. They say the lake hungers." Victor scoffed, but the fear in Danny's eyes was contagious. The next day, the group decided to take the inflatable raft Victor had brought and paddle out onto the lake. Victor insisted it was the best way to prove there was nothing supernatural about the place. The water was unnervingly cold, even in the midday sun. As they drifted over the center of the lake, Lena glanced down. The water was so dark it seemed endless, but occasionally she thought she saw shapes, structures, perhaps, the remnants of Drevik. Then Danny gasped. "Look!" A massive shadow moved beneath them, too large to be a fish or any known creature. It glided slowly, then disappeared. "Did you see that?" Danny whispered. Victor laughed nervously. "Just debris. Probably a fallen tree." But when Max leaned over to peer into the water, he screamed. A pale face stared back at him from below, its eyes hollow and black. The face moved closer, and before anyone could react, a hand shot out of the water, grabbing Max's arm. The raft rocked violently as Max struggled, his screams filling the air. The others tried to pull him back, but the hand was too strong. With a final, desperate cry, Max was dragged under. The water stilled as quickly as it had erupted. Max was gone. The survivors scrambled back to shore, shaking and soaked. Danny sobbed uncontrollably, while Victor paced, muttering to himself. "We need to leave," Lena said firmly. But when they reached their campsite, they found their belongings scattered and torn. The path back to the main road was overgrown with impossibly thick vines, as if the forest itself had conspired to trap them. As night fell, the whispers returned, louder now, and accompanied by the faint sound of dripping water. The group huddled by the fire, but it offered little comfort. A figure appeared at the edge of the light. It was Max, his clothes dripping and his skin deathly pale. "Max!" Danny cried, rushing toward him. "No, stop!" Lena yelled, but it was too late. Danny reached out to touch him, and Max's face twisted into a horrifying grin. His mouth opened impossibly wide, and a flood of black water poured out, drenching Danny. She screamed as her body convulsed, her skin turning as pale as Max's. Within moments, she collapsed, lifeless. The whispers grew deafening, and more figures emerged from the darkness, villagers with hollow eyes and bloated faces. "They're here," Victor whispered, his voice breaking. Lena and Victor ran, their only thought to escape. The forest seemed endless, and the whispers followed them, growing louder and more insistent. Victor tripped, falling hard onto the rocky ground. Lena turned to help him, but before she could reach him, shadowy hands emerged from the earth, pulling him down. He screamed, clawing at the dirt, but the hands were relentless. "Lena, run," he shouted before disappearing beneath the ground. Lena stumbled forward, tears streaming down her face. She didn't know where she was going, only that she needed to get away. The whispers were everywhere now, overlapping and echoing in her mind. She found herself back at the lake, its surface unnaturally still. The figures of the drowned stood at the shore, watching her with their hollow eyes. "You can't leave," a voice whispered, low and resonant. "The lake always hungers." Lena stood frozen as the drowned began to sing. Their voices were hauntingly beautiful, harmonizing in a melody that seemed to pierce her soul. The water rippled, and the lake itself seemed to come alive. Dark tendrils rose from the surface, writhing and reaching for her. Desperation took over. Lena ran to the church, the only structure still standing in the village ruins. Inside, she found a crumbling altar and a strange, ancient book. The pages detailed a ritual, one that might seal the lake's hunger, but at a terrible cost. The drowned surrounded the church, their song shaking the walls. Lena had no choice. She recited the words, her voice trembling. The air grew cold, and the shadows in the lake thrashed violently. As she finished the ritual, the drowned screamed in unison, their bodies dissolving into mist. The lake roared, then stilled, its surface finally calm. But Lena felt the weight of their song in her mind, a haunting melody that would never leave her. The price had been her soul, and though the lake's hunger was sated, she would forever be its guardian.